Okay, Jerry, thank you very much. I'm going to quickly get to the next presenter just to keep us reasonably on time. So, let me find my place here. All right, next up is the Project Grace, Graceful Remediation with Authenticated Certificateless Encryption towards a secure internet. So that is Kangwei Woo, Executive Director of QuantumCIEL. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction. Okay, as I only have 10 minutes, so I think I will actually have to run pretty quickly through some of these. Okay, let's see how it goes. Right, first off, I would like to introduce, I think, some of the members within the team that we have. So QuantumCIEL basically is a consultancy company doing a lot of security consultancy for particularly smart city implementation. So therein we were very fortunate to have been able to work directly with some of the critical agencies, government agencies in Singapore, that is the Cybersecurity Agency, as well as the Government Technology Agency of Singapore. So therein, I think we have also been grateful to some of the partners that we have for some of these implementations, particularly Vibe Cyber Security, Secure IC, and also an academic partner that we have at the University of Glasgow. So what issues are we actually trying to address? Right, this morning we heard that 50% of the people are going to be living in cities presently, right? In fact, they are living in cities presently. And 2030 is not so many years away, right, where we expect 80% to be living in cities. So what problems are we anticipating? So first off, I think you have the population density that is basically rising rapidly. And then at the same time, you also have a situation where the population itself is growing, right? So denser population and a growing population. So therein you have to, in some sense, for many of the city governments, really the challenge would be how do you cater to this profile of population moving forward and having no prospect of increasing budget, right? So you are expected to deliver more, but with maybe fewer resources. So that is one big challenge that we face. So typically you see that on this world map, the areas that color in red, those are the critical areas, right? So things are sort of getting to be quite serious already, all right? So I should explain a little bit about what the black regions are. Okay, those are super critical. Right? So moving forward, we're going to have more of the regions that would be colored black moving forward. So this is a study that was conducted on a yearly basis. So I think Singapore is fortunate in the sense that basically it's a small place. The size of Singapore is no bigger than Greater Boston, for example. Right? So therein, I think it's quite easy, or at least it's easier to implement certain things compared to some of the other cities. Maybe the challenges are actually different, right? So in any case, I think we try to put our best foot forward. So I think we actually heard of some of these situations and trends that we have, I think, seen in the last several years, and that is basically things that looks like they're coming from the digital side really has an impact on the physical side and vice versa. Right, therein, when we talk about IT, information technology, at some level, it has a correspondence with OT, which is operational technology, on the physical side. And then over time, the division between them seems to have become more and more blurry, right? So there is a convergence. So how about this? Are we not sharing? Right? So I will not name the city where this photo was taken, okay? But then in some sense, okay, we have our own, I think, war stories to tell that that is depicted in this particular photograph, right? Therein you have so many different devices. So these typically are cameras, all right, looking at the same stretch of road, okay? So you can imagine this might be a three-lane road, right? So you have so many cameras looking at the same stretch of road, okay? Presumably for different purposes, right? So why are they not sharing? What is so confidential that would prevent this level of sharing? So if we think about it, really maybe there isn't, okay? But then if, let's say, city resources are limited, this would be a great place to start to think about what could actually be shared, right? So before things become critical, for example, maybe certain crime has taken place on this stretch of road, and the police who had taken the video had done some annotation on that. So maybe that would make it critical, or sensitive. But any time before that, it should not be. Right? So moving forward, I think there are many examples whereby we could, in fact, share these resources, share the data, share the information, share the knowledge. Ultimately, I think what we wanted to do is really share the wisdom. But we're not doing that, I think, not in every sense of that word. Okay? So I think in the commercial world, we have seen successful models in which, in some limited sense, some of the sharing has taken place. Right? So then these are some of the examples that we can see. Then how do we translate these kinds of implementation, these kinds of approaches, to the different activities that we have, let's say in the context of a smart city? Okay, it can be done, and maybe to some extent it ought to be starting maybe from this point forward. Okay, some of the challenges really would be that the resources that you have, okay, will have a lot of other physical attributes associated with it. So for example, time might be a sensitive attribute. Okay, maybe at certain time, some of the bicycle parking is not allowed. At some critical location, it is not allowed, and so forth. And we could apply this to other form of resources as well, right? So in which case there are more requirements, so to speak, right, to manage some of these resources. But that's okay, because as we have heard earlier from the other speakers, these are all manageable issues. It's a question of, I think, basically line them up and then try to tackle them in a way that would be, in some sense, reductionistic. Right? So you try to think of the small little parts, try to straighten those out first, and then put the things together, and then you have it. Right? In that sense, I think if we do more of that, and then more sharing comes in, it can be achieved. So we also have heard a lot about trust. Okay, so in my slides, this is where trust comes in. Right? So on the left-hand side, you find that these are typical requirements or typical desires that you have for the digital world, that you have confidentiality, you have integrity, you have availability, right? Earlier, one of the speakers mentioned that if you have a smart hospital, we cannot allow a hacker to disrupt the services at the hospital, because that would be life-threatening, okay? So all in all, what we are trying to go for is really, what is trustworthiness, right? And you really need that to the extent, okay, that as we continue in this process, trustworthiness becomes trustless. Okay, just as when we say something is valuable, okay, we would like that value to get to an extent that it being priceless. Okay, so in that sense, that is what we are going for. And on the right-hand side, you will see that these are attributes that we have been talking about: privacy, safety, and reliability. Okay, so I would basically put forth the notion that these are actually different faces of the same coin. And all of these are rooted in trust. And that is what we are trying to, I think, in some sense, be able to improve on the current situation. And we also heard a lot about IoT, right? So these are typically slow-moving IoT, all right? So, but nonetheless, they are quite dynamic, right? Things change, things move around, okay? How about some examples of faster moving ones? All right, so let's see if I can get the laser pointer to work. So this particular IoT belongs to one Mr. Kim. All right, but then we're going to see a lot of the proliferation in this particular space. And personally, I think when they estimate 50 billion IoT devices, I think for sure that's an underestimation. Okay, just think about how many devices you yourself own. Okay, not counting your refrigerator, nor your kitchen sink. All right, so more than a lot, more than a lot. So let me explain a little bit about Project Grace. So basically, we are in a sort of ideal situation where we are actually able to implement many of these capabilities in a city environment like Singapore. Okay, so all in all, the key point really is that we want to fix up the security of these systems, starting from key management. All right, so what I mentioned about trust is really the key management at the end of the day. So I think I really hope to be able to speak to many of you in order to see how we can collaborate on some of these enterprises. Okay, so key thing about the key management here is that unlike, let's say, what you might be familiar with, whereby your traditional public key infrastructure requires certificates, okay, so therein the value proposition really is that there are no certificates. Okay, therein it simplifies a lot of the implementations, and then we are really able to move very quickly forward in very large-scale implementations. So that's the key point, right? So what we're doing really is that we want to come up with approaches that makes it easy to deploy. So for example, what you see here might be just a micro SD card, okay, that fits into your smartphone, and that's it. The rest of it will be done, and it will be transparent to the user. So that's the whole point. Okay, now in applying this technology to smart metering, so the purpose is to actually share large infrastructure. So there should be no reason why smart metering community need to have a communication network when in fact one is provided for over public Wi-Fi systems. Okay, so with security in place, these large implementation can in fact overlap and they can leverage on each other. Right? So if you are able to join me tomorrow afternoon, then I'll be basically, I think, exploring some of these challenges and implementations during the poster session. So I thank you so much.